I love my Strymon Flint. It quickly became one of the most important and most used pedals on my pedal board. So much so that I was looking for a second one. I really wanted to have a Strymon Flint on every pedal board that I had. That's how much I'd come to rely on that pedal. So I was in the market for a second one. I was looking around, but still I was looking at about £240 for a second-hand Strymon Flint. And then there's also the pedal nerd inside of me that doesn't often like to double up on pedals. I like to try out different flavors of stuff. I don't often like to have the same of one pedal. I'd been aware of the Keeley Hydra from a distance, but then I think I saw a rig rundown with Ariel Posen, who had previously been using Strymon Flints and at the moment is currently running a Keeley Hydra on his board. The ethos of these two pedals is very similar. They are multi-mode reverb and tremolo pedals with a bit more of a vintage sound and direction. They're not going for the crazy ambient washy reverbs. So I picked up a Hydra in the end, and first of all, I'm seriously impressed. On the face of it, there is a lot that the Keeley Hydra can do that the Flint can't do. Off the top of my head, we have onboard presets, which the Flint doesn't have. The Flint you have to buy the favorite switch to kind of access another preset. With the Hydra, we have 3 onboard presets. We have slightly more control and secondary functions with the Hydra. We also have a pitch vibrato, which the Flint can't do. And also we have a shimmer available to us if we want it on the plate reverb algorithm, along with a few other things like tap tempo for the tremolo and things like that. On the face of it, the Hydra's got a bit more going for it. So we're going to shoot the two out today. This is the first time I'm actually A-Bing the two of them together, so it's going to be really interesting for me. And maybe the Keeley Hydra will replace my Strymon Flint. The guitar we're playing today, you won't have seen this yet, but this is a Baum Guitars from Denmark. This is from their Vega series, and this is the Carve model, so slightly SG-like. We've got some P90s going on here as well, and we're going to today, for a change, we're also going to be going into the Black Star Amped 1. This is my clean sound. Let's start with some spring reverb. We'll go with the Flint first. This is everything at 12 o'clock on the spring reverb sound. Extremely splashy. Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like a proper spring, doesn't it? Let's try the same on the Keeley Hydra. Very interesting. They're both great spring sounds. To me, the Flint does sound more splashy. I'm going to use like spring buzzwords here. More splashy, more drippy to me. Whereas that Keeley Hydra still has a bit of that drip, but maybe it sounds a bit, there's a bit more of a resonant frequency going on there. What we can do with the Hydra, though, is change the age of the spring, which I'm pretty sure you can't do in the Flint. So if we go over to the Hydra, and I think we want to make the spring newer sounding. So if we hold the colour and turn that up, should give us a bouncier, springier spring. Oh yeah. We want to wind it back from there. That's almost a delay pedal. You can really hear the individual springs. So let's go about there. Yeah, that's really interesting. I like both. I do think the Flint has it more nailed down though. The Hydra sounds a little bit more like a delay pedal tuned to sound like a spring, whereas the Flint has that almost rubber bandness. You can really hear the spring flexing, I guess, is the sound. I mean, it's really close. The Flint just has that little, it's almost like a modulation, a little flex on the spring that you can hear. Both are really good. I'm going to give this first point to the Flint though. So next I want to combine that spring with a bit of harmonic tremolo, which is one of my favourite sounds in the Flint at least. So we'll start with the Hydra. I've got things set up relatively the same across both pedals. Oh, it's close. It's really close. Now, there are some differences there, but really harmonic tremolo is a really interesting effect. Essentially, your signal is split into two. One of those kind of controls the lower frequencies and one of them modulates the higher frequencies, and they kind of go like that together. Now, to my ears, comment down below if you think I'm wrong here. The Flint seems to have more emphasis on those lower frequencies, and the Hydra has a slight more emphasis on those upper frequencies. Now, this to me gives the impression that the Flint has slightly more body and movement in the harmonic tremolo, and the Flint has a bit more presence and bite, I guess. It's so subtle though. I'd say the Flint also has a slight more wow to the sound. Maybe it's slightly more sine wavy. There's a bit more of a pulse to it, whereas the Hydra has a bit of a smoother modulation. It's a really close one to call. I'm going to call it a draw for now. The Flint has more body. The Hydra has more presence, I would say. Okay, let's move on to some plate reverb sounds. Now on the Flint, this is 70s. So I guess it's kind of going for that lexicon plate reverb type thing. So more of a digital sound. Similarly with the Hydra, although it does have a trick up its sleeve with the shimmer effect. Let's start with the Flint for now. Okay, so interestingly, the Flint to me does sound very much like that Lexicon type thing. I'm comparing it to my, what's it called? The Von Gogh Ultra Shear, which is very much that Lexicon type thing. For me, the Flint is getting closer to that. The Hydra, on the other hand, is a more generic plate reverb. I do prefer the colour knob on the Flint when you turn it down, which I usually like to do with my reverbs, especially plates and more ambient stuff. The Flint seems to have a more natural roll-off, whereas the Hydra, it sounds more like a filter. It sounds like you're filtering out that high end. Now, what I did mention earlier is that the Hydra does have a trick up its sleeve with that shimmer reverb, which a lot of people love, and I think it's a useful thing to have on the Hydra. So let's check that out. Okay, so I think this is where the theme starts to emerge between these two pedals. The Flint is very much going for vintage, correct sounds of actual units, whereas the Hydra is aiming to do good versions of all of those effects. You know, we have a good spring, we have a good harmonic tremolo, we have a good plate. Now, when it comes to the plate reverb, I'm going to give it to the Hydra purely because of the shimmer effect, which I think is going to be a deal breaker for quite a few players out there between these two pedals, even though I do slightly prefer the roll-off on the collar knob on the Flint. Okay, finally, let's get into some room hall sounding reverbs combined with a bit of natural tremolo. Let's start with the Hydra this time. Now, to me, with the tremolo sounds there's not much between them. It's both are good sounding tremolos. As it stands here, the hall reverb on the Hydra is much smaller sounding than the Flint. But again, might be another point for the Hydra, because we can actually change the size of the hall all the way from a big cathedral to a much smaller room. And to me, that sounds like it's on a much smaller room sound at the side at the moment. So let's turn it up to a bigger hall. Still, this Flint sounds like a bigger hall. It's also got a little bit of pre-delay, which I guess is a slightly more natural sound if you're actually using the reverb from a room. However, I do think it's really cool being able to change the size of the room on the Hydra. Let's turn it back down to a much smaller room and see how that compares. Now, see, that's just a sound the Flint can't do. Now, this is a close one to call. These are two very similar pedals. They're both do a great job of what they say they're going to do. I would say it comes down to the fact that the Flint is going for those vintage units. You know, as I said before, we have a 60s type spring from Fender amps as well as the harmonic tremolo. And I also think the 70s plate reverb is much more closer to that lexicon type of sound. Whereas I said earlier, the Keeley is just doing a good or a great, in some circumstances, version of a spring, a plate, a hall. For me, I think I prefer the sound of the Flint, but the functionality of the Hydra. I think it even just comes down to having those onboard 3 presets with the Hydra that I think sway me towards that pedal. Let me know which one you guys preferred in the comments down below. I think they're both great pedals, and I think it's worth considering one if you're looking at the other. Thanks guys for checking out the video. If you like what you saw, please subscribe and maybe check out some more, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers guys.